Welcome to Meat Matters with Jenny Mitich, your go-to podcast for everything related to animal-based lifestyles and optimizing your metabolic health. Today's interview is with Brett Smith of My Metabolic Life. I first met Brett at the Chicagoland Healing Humanity meetup in January, and his story of healing using an animal-based lifestyle is nothing short of remarkable. I was especially impressed by the fact that he has reversed soft and calcified plaques in his heart arteries, and we dive into how he did that at depth in this interview. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button. By simply subscribing, we can help get this important information out to more and more people. And if you'd like to take your support a bit further, please consider leaving a 5-star rating on whatever app you're listening on. The more positive ratings we have, the more this podcast will be pushed out to the people that need to hear it. And with that, let's get into this interview with Brett Smith. I am here with Brett Smith from My Metabolic Life. Brett, thanks so much for joining me.
Jenny, thank you so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to be with you here today.
So Brett and I actually met at the Healing Humanity meetup that was what, January?
Yeah.
So that was great. Carrie Mann is putting together a documentary. That's the Healing Humanity documentary. He's doing these meetups. Yes, exactly. He's doing these meetups all over the place. So it's such a great way to link up with the other low carb, keto, carnivore people in your area. So it was great to meet you there. And we decided to do an interview. So Brett, I don't know much about your origin story, how you came to, low carb or whatever dietary philosophy you consume. We'll talk about that in a minute, but could you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
I'm going to try to keep it under 2 minutes, this thing, because it can be a 2-hour discussion on its own. But I come from a whole career in the health insurance, and then a subset of the health insurance is the population health management world, of which the corporate wellness and the disease management programs sit in. And then I ran sales and marketing for a company that did that. I sold employers, predominantly all self-funded, so kind of from the 200 to 80,000 employee group. So that was kind of my target market. And I unfortunately became kind of a heavier person while in that, and I wound up being a certified health coach, the same certification that happens at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. They teach the course, but the doctor right here that wrote the predictive modeling algorithms built into the health risk assessment that we used. But all of our RNs that were our coaches had to pass this diet, nutrition, stress management, basic fitness, and smoke cessation program, because I had to fill out all the requests for proposals for all these large groups, because they all have major consultants that they pay and or insurance brokers. There's always a get across the threshold to be invited to, and you have to do 200-300 questions, and can't pull nurses off once a week to spend 8 hours typing up those. So I had to become certified just like them. And I wasn't looking like I was the picture of the corporate wellness image that, I didn't look like an aerobics instructor or a lifter or anything like this. And I was a former college athlete. I played D3 college tennis at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Anyhow, so I, the last weekend of October 2018, I'm at my sister's 60th birthday party. She also came from that industry because she was the national practice leader for the second largest consulting firm for corporate wellness and disease management programs. So it's kind of in the family a little bit. And we were celebrating her 60th birthday. I look at my younger brother and I go, wow, he just looked like 35 pounds in the last 4 months. And I just said to him, we're all at a restaurant. And I'm like, how did you do that? And he goes, I did this low carb keto thing. And it just kind of caught me a little dumbstruck, because I'm like, I had spent 10 years in the corporate wellness disease management world, and nobody ever once uttered the word keto or low carb in that whole time. And so it caught me off guard. I was 4 years removed from the corporate wellness, where I put on even more weight. And got to the point where it's just much easier to show. So literally the day after that dinner, the before picture is. So if you see
Oh, wow.
me
If you're
here.
watching this podcast on video, you'll see he's holding up a poster of his before picture, and he was big. How much did you weigh then?
Oh, 330.
Wow. How tall are you? You're very tall.
I'm 6'3".
Okay.
So you can get to 215 with a suit on and not have it really be that much. But he had another 115, and then you start showing it. So anyhow, that before picture was taken the morning after this dinner I'm telling you about. I went to Chicago and I played in a national, it's called platform tennis tournament 2 years earlier when I was 53. My partner that I played with, who was on my college tennis team, we took 5th in the nation in the 45 and unders. And so we felt pretty good about that because we're almost 10 years older than most of the people in the tournament. And this time I was so much bigger and heavier, and I'd had now 4 different meniscus surgeries on my knees from being what I would call functionally fat. And I was just thoroughly disgusted. So I came home from that weekend in Chicago and I'm like, what's this low carb keto thing that my brother did? And I started looking into it. I called him. I said, what do you have? Send me it. He had almost next to nothing, but he paid attention to a lot of good things that I was aware of out there. He was health conscious, but needed to lose some weight, which he did. And I'm just like, I start looking at it and then I start filtering what I'm seeing through the eyes, just like doctors are freaked out over keto because they're taught that ketosis is dangerous. They're not taught that every baby in the mother's womb for 9 months is in the state of nutritional ketosis. When they're birthed and they are on their mother's breast milk, which is 65% saturated fat, that they stay in the state of nutritional ketosis. And most of humanity, until about 100 to 80 years ago, live most of the time in nutritional ketosis, at least under the bell curve of it. Right. And but I didn't know all of this. I was just freaked out because I was as gaslit as all the dietitians, doctors, and health coaches, because the book I just showed you didn't mention the word ketosis. You know, it did the low fat, walk another mile, eat another apple, calorie in, calorie out method. And that's why we never hardly helped anybody. But anyhow, so I started hearing that people inside of this community, as I'm kind of looking at it, are talking about LDLs, not necessarily a bad cholesterol. In fact, that's a whole nother topic. And that saturated fat is healthy. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is against the guidelines. And I sold disease management guidelines for a career. I know what they are. And I'm like, oh my God, my brother's going to be a skinny guy in a casket. And so I, being a loving, doting older brother, I'm going to go, well, I sold predictive modeling algorithms, and I had a short stint in pharma where I had 2 cardiovascular drugs, the #1 sleeping pill of all time, and a benign prostatic hyperplasia thing for guys who get up all night long and go to the bathroom, but women can do that too. Anyhow, even with, so I'm just like, with that kind of background, I'm like, well, I'm going to just jump into PubMed and look at the published research out there and show him where he's really flirting with disaster with all of this, because it has to be a fad, crazy diet, or I would have heard about it because I spent 10 years in this industry, but so I go into PubMed and I start looking at the studies and the research, and I start following the people who are doing studies and research, and I come across Low Carb Down Under and other things. I come across Ivor Cummins, but I came across right here Dr. Sarah Hallberg. And Dr. Sarah was at the University of Indiana, and she became the chief medical officer at a company called Virta, V-I-R-T-A, Virta Health. And she had a she did a TED Talk that then I saw 4 years later as a YouTube video. And the TED Talk was, in order to reverse type 2 diabetes, you need to ignore the guidelines. And that at that very moment, still gaslit from my previous life, I'm like, you mean this is easily reversible? Hypertension, diabetes, and I was just scratching the surface, but I'm like, we're all taught that these are chronic progressive diseases, and you need to meet with our coaches every quarter to make sure you're taking all your pills. And it blew my mind that I'm like, oh my God, I just spent a decade in an industry that shouldn't even exist. It should all be about disease reversal. So it took me about 30 hours in November 18 to get there, and then another 30 hours, and I just became fascinated with it. And I started in December 19, just cutting out the obvious junk carbs, but said, I'm going to get serious about this. And so the after picture, I dropped in by September 1. So in about a full 8 months, I dropped 115 pounds. And the last part of that origin, because the thing that will keep me serious with this for the rest of my life is, at first, it was me just being stigmatized by being an obese person that was in the corporate wellness. And at the time I was in it, an overweight person in the corporate wellness and a certified coach and all of these crazy nuts things. And so that just kind of, you could say there's a certain amount of shame that comes with all of that I really wanted to prove I could lose the weight and look like a college athlete again. But then as I dropped 38 pounds in the first 6 weeks, I'm just like, wow, I could in the not too distant future could look like I belong back in this industry again, because I'd been out for 4 years and I'm just, so I went and started talking to people from the old industry, and they were all like deer in headlights. I could tell I thought they figured this all out while I was 4 years out of the industry and I was still behind the curve, and I realized I'm way ahead of the curve. And still, you and I are right now, at this moment, 6 years later, way ahead of the curve. But what happens is I got hired by a company that does kidney disease management, and they were all excited because two of their chief officers, executive board type folks, were understanding a little bit about ketosis. They knew about Virta Health, looked at them as a competitor in ways, and we're all excited that I was all into this. And so what happens is I sign on the dotted line, and I'm now in my office and I'm pacing back and forth because I'm really amped up. And I'm like, oh my God, I am going to go help save the world. I'm going to bring this message that is not being taught at all in corporate wellness, disease management programs, in internal medicine doctors. And I'm going to help change all of this. And at that, I was about to say to myself, I'm 4 or 5 months away from being thin again. I'm not on metformin. I'm not on blood pressure medication. And I was about to say, I'm going to be bulletproof. And then it hit me. And I'm like, with Dr. Sarah, the reason that Virta Health got created in the first place, there is a guy originally from, I believe, Norway, who sold, was a tech billionaire, became a tech billionaire because he had a Zillow-like company that he sold to Zillow. When he was after that, he was 50 years old. He went and won the 15 over Ironman competition. So the most fit 50-year-old in the world comes home from that, and he gets an A1C test as part of a physical 3 days later, and he's got a 5.6 A1C. He's almost full type 2 diabetic. And he goes, how can this be? I'm the fittest person in the world. All that carb loading and all the crap that they were taught, that we've been taught. And so he's the one who then went and found Dr. Stephen Finney and Dr. Thomas Volek, and they were the gurus in the science community on ketosis. He found them, they found Dr. Sarah, and the four of them, along with some venture capital people, created Virta Health, reversing type 2 diabetes with the ketogenic diet. And so when I said I'm going to be bulletproof, I realized, I go, well, that guy was type 2 diabetic and he looked like a Greek god. And I remember when I was in college, my roommate that came from my same high school was on the track and cross country team. And he had the #1 best-selling book in the bookstores all across the country. It was called The Complete Book of Running by Tom Fix. And I remember about 5 years when I got out of college, after watching him write all his carb loading at every meal at the food service into his workbook, that Tom Fix at 52, 53 died of a heart attack on a 5K run, again, looking like a Greek god. So those two things, when I was about to say I'm going to be bulletproof, they hit me and I go, oh my God, I'm a moron for thinking this. Being thin and not on medications means nothing. 10 years earlier, while in the corporate wellness world, they wanted me to go and live what a high-risk cardiac person would go through for secondary screenings, interventions and stuff, and getting them rolling in the coaching program. So I went and got a CT heart scan when I was 45. I'm now at that moment that I'm talking about with the epiphany and oh my God, I'm a moron. I started saying, okay, well, 10 years ago, I had 0 plaque in my arteries. I had a 0 CAC. If I can go get another 0 CAC, then I can start celebrating. I can start doing the bulletproof thought through my head. But I just had that rational moment where I'm just like, oh God, I know better than this. Don't be stupid. So I went 2 days later, self-referred myself to Aurora, largest healthcare system in the state, and got another CT heart scan for $50. And 2 days later, they call me back, Mr. Smith, you have a calcium score of 268. And I'm smack dab in intermediate risk. So now, instead of just wanting from a vanity or a shaming of my previous being overweight as a corporate wellness person, now my goal is I don't want to die of a heart attack. And so I took all the people that I was paying attention to and listening to, the Ivor Cummings, who has a podcast called The Fat Emperor, which was now it's just called Ivor Cummings, but it's predominantly a heart disease and a heart reversal podcast. And that's where I found somebody who actually he was on the board at on the purchasing board, selection board for corporate wellness programs at Wausau Papers, who 10 years earlier, I had sold them their corporate wellness program. And this guy had a CAC score around 900 and zeroed it all out. And Ivor was interviewing him. And I go, this guy looks really familiar. And I realized when he said Wausau Papers, I go, that's who purchased the predictive modeling algorithms I was selling at the time. So I started applying that. I then wound up, and again, coming in for 15 seconds here, about 6 months later with that corporate wellness or that disease management company, I was out in LA and came across a company called the Pulse Cardiac Company. I don't know if you can see that there.
Yep.
And actually it shows up better on the other one, Pulse. And here's the sales binder, because a year later, after doing year-over-year results, they measure the soft plaque in your artery that the CAC score doesn't show.
Right.
And so when we were learning about that test while we were out on that business trip, I'm like, wow, do you have a phlebotomist here? Can I get one of these? And I told him about my CAC score and everything. And I said, but I believe I can reverse this. I think I found the protocol, which he looked at me like I was, had a third eye right here, because that's obviously crazy talk. And I understood he would. It made sense to me. And then we did a year-over-year one, and I had, in that year-over-year, dropped 85% of the soft plaque out of my arteries as measured by this test. And 2 days later, or that next day, I called because I have a buddy who's a cardiologist who we did his first year, because he had a heart attack 2019, the year before. And I've known him since we grew up tennis players together in the Milwaukee area. And he went and got his first one as I was getting my year-over-year results. So we're on the same Zoom call with the doctor who created this. And the next day, we're coming off of a pickleball court. I play all the racket sports. And I go, well, what'd you think of that thing? He goes, none of us cardiologists understand what's going into measuring this test, because it's really measuring what's going on inside of the plaques and whether the disease is progressing or healing. And thus they know why diseases progress and heal, and or that disease, atherosclerotic plaque. And so he's just like, it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So I called the company the next day. I said, I got a hold of the regional sales guy. I go, do you have anybody in Wisconsin? They're like, no. And within 48 hours, I'm their Wisconsin sales rep. Unfortunately, it's during COVID. It's 2020 and end of August 2020. Doctors still aren't seeing their patients yet face to face. They're not going to see a rep talking about a test that they don't believe could have any form of reality out there. But for 8-9 months, I was able to be a sales rep calling on doctors, selling this, saying, this is incredible. We're going to find all your people that have plaque. Instead of worrying about LDL, find the actual disease. So this is why I got, and I had a background in cardiovascular meds back in my pharma days and the predictive modeling algorithms, all of this stuff. So like you, I'm a bit of a data junkie and into everything that I can learn. And I've probably put 16, 17,000 hours since 2018. I no longer watch Packer games, Bucks games, Brewer games, Badger, Marquette. I don't care anymore. I just want to learn everything I can about all of this. So fast forward to earlier last year, instead of informally coaching people who approached me because I was the poster child for, first everybody thought I had cancer and said, Brett, they thought I was dying, but you look so good. And I go, no, I just figured out why everybody's fat and sick, and it makes sense now. And so I help people do that. But now, as it says on my name here, if you just go to http:// My Metabolic Life, it's not a www. You go to my website and I coach people. And in my 6-8 months now of doing this full time, I've done 20 times the amount of helping people than in the 8-10 years of selling wellness coaching and disease management programs. We never reversed anybody's hypertension, diabetes. Took their EGFR, took them from dialysis or near dialysis to having normal function kidneys again. Never reversed bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression with anybody because we didn't understand nutritional ketosis. We didn't understand the basic physiologic state. And that's still not taught to this day in any medical school out there, which is why, because let me just do 15 seconds and we're going to have you be the doctor, Jenny. And every time I ask you a question, you say yes.
Okay.
So doctor, you're saying that all these meds I'm on and these problems I have are because I had insulin resistance that ran amok over the years?
Yes.
Is it possible for me to reverse these things if I actually attack the insulin resistance, and which is really an insulin problem?
Yes.
So what you're saying, maybe within 6 weeks to 3 to 4 months, I might be off all of my medications if I can get serious and maybe tackle a little bit of sugar addiction that I might be suffering from?
Yes.
Well, you just figured out right there with that conversation why this is not taught in any medical school, because it's the end of healthcare as we know it, of being 20% of our gross domestic national product. And it's going to go back to Marcus Welby days where if you break your leg, you fall off your bike, you get some really weird disease, or it used to be a rare cancer. Now almost 50% of our population is, if things keep going the trajectory they're on, in our lifetimes are going to have cancer. It should go back to 5%. And all of these things can happen, but that's why we don't find cures for anything. We just find diseases for symptoms instead of reversing these things. So that's my origin story. It's a little longer than the 2 minutes I promised, but this is why, and maybe someday I'll find something I have a passion over. Yeah, I mean, after being part of the problem and selling things that really didn't help people, now I know how to help people, and I'm breaking doctors' brains. So that cardiologist I told you about, beyond the My Metabolic Life podcast that I do on my own, I have another one called the Metabochondriacs that he and I co-host because he wound up reversing his heart disease also. And so we're both incredibly passionate about understanding metabolism. Mitochondria are kind of the cornerstone of what's happening inside of all of our metabolisms for the most part. And you understand where that hits. That's why the Metabochondriacs, we're maniacs about mitochondria and metabolism.
I am happy to announce that my new book, Complete Carnivore, is now available for pre-order. Complete Carnivore is an in-depth guide to the carnivore diet along with 80+ carnivore recipes. And they're not just like cooking meat recipes. There's recipes for carnivores at any stage of their journey, and it definitely helps you mix it up a little bit if you're getting bored on the carnivore diet. When I was writing this book, I was really aiming to make this like like the encyclopedia of the carnivore diet, and I am super excited for you to read it. Pre-sales are a huge deal for any first-time author, so if you'd like to show your support for me in any way, please consider pre-ordering this book. I will put the links in the show notes. Amazon and Barnes & Noble both have really good pre-order deals, where you will get the lowest price the book ever was from the time that you pre-order it to the time it's released. So let's say, for example, Amazon has a flash sale on my book, and you've already pre-ordered it, but then it goes down in price to like $20. Well, on release day, you will pay that $20 lowest price because you had already pre-ordered the book. Also, the book typically ships on release day, so you get it right away. Let's get this book onto every bookstore shelf in America and share the healing power of the carnivore diet with the world. Pre-order links are in the show notes, and I thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. I mean, I can tell you've had a heck of a background, and you're very passionate about what you do, and it's awesome that you came from, you know, an industry, a wellness industry that was not helping people, to, you know, having that kind of light switch moment where you saw your brother and then diving into the research and it changed your life. This is your life now, you know, completely different.
So radically different. And, you know, sometimes there's pitfalls along the way, because before we realize, and when you and I spoke on my channel a couple days earlier, I asked the question, so did you ever run over anybody verbally? Well, I made that mistake with a lot of people, because once you realize what can happen, and then you look at what everybody's doing around you, all you want to do is save people. And not everybody's ready at this particular time when you're talking to them to want to be saved. They, you know, or we wouldn't have alcoholics, we wouldn't have anything in the world, because we'd all just recognize we have issues and we would all just get on top of these things. So, just really quick, as I realized late 2018, early 2019, that it's all about living as much as possible, not 24/7, 365, but in this state of nutritional ketosis, because that's where the body heals. The first time I started hearing carnivore was early January 2019, and the head of IT at that disease management kidney company I went and worked for in March was a carnivore. And he told me about Sean Baker and everything. And it didn't scare me, because I just realized that, well, carnivore simply kind of means as close to zero carb as possible. And by this time I realized there's no such thing as an essential carb. And and I'd seen enough different things to realize that, well, if you look at the Paleolithic era, when we basically were hunter-gatherers, you know, we hadn't yet made 90% of the fruits and vegetables that we now consume, because those are mainly man-made type things. They didn't organically happen out in the wild outside of a few berries. And, you know, so it didn't freak me out, even though it was like, well, you know, I started this as just kind of realizing from Dr. Eric Westman that there's what's called medical strength ketosis, because at first I started at kind of 30 carbs a day. And then I heard him talk about this, and it made sense. And I looked at his stuff, and I go, okay, well, if I want to guarantee results, I'll just stay at under 20 carbs. So people can go to my website on my blog. I've got one entitled saying, you know, if you want to have the health and body of your youth, and you can count to 20, it's easily achievable. Because, you know, and I show at the bottom like 20 meals that I routinely ate during that 115-pound weight loss. And I would routinely have steak with a little bit of asparagus, eggs with a little bit of broccoli. You know, I'd have a small handful of berries with one of my meals a day. So, because it all worked in the under 20 aspect, but through time, I moved much more towards, instead of saying carnivore, which, because I also realized people don't understand keto, it doesn't mean anything outside of potentially fear. So I just use the term nutrivore. I eat the most nutriently dense, bioavailable food that I can. And which led me more and more from the 20 carbish to closer to the 0 carbish, even though I never made, until this last year, a concerted effort to say, I'm going to do a 3-4 month pure carnivore experience. Because I wasn't, you know, and I'm sure you know who Barquet is, you know, and he'd say, hey, if you're 85, 90% carnivore and you have a little bit of berry and veg along the way, you're a carnivore, or call it you're meat-based instead of being plant-based from the spectrum of veganism. There's a spectrum, and you can be in the spectrum of nutritional ketosis and be a vegetarian, be a vegan with tofu and different types of other protein things that I don't think are the healthiest proteins, but we'll leave that there. You can do these things under the umbrella of staying in nutritional ketosis. So this last year, I finally, from August 1 till Thanksgiving, I even gave up coffee and I just ate meat, fish, and eggs. And didn't have berries, didn't have coffee, didn't have olives. I even gave up the sauerkraut, which is part of my heart protocol, actually, for reversing the heart disease, because MK4, MK7, and K2, which that's one of the, you get them from meats, but you get very rich in sauerkraut, fermented cabbage. And so I have a supplement I take, which has those in there. So I wasn't worried about not having the sauerkraut, because I reversed it before I started sauerkraut, because sauerkraut was always one of those things that I'd go like sardines, say, I could never eat that stuff. And now I eat it.
I like sauerkraut.
Well, I never did. I never thought I did. I loved Reuben sandwiches, but I'd always scrape the sauerkraut off of it. I never have it put on a brat or a burger or anything. Now, if I have a meal, unless I'm out, I have 2 forkfuls of sauerkraut with it. But during that carnivore 4 months, I didn't. And many great things happened for me with all of that. And, outside of fasting, it's really the healthiest thing you can do for yourself. And we can't live in a fasted state. We do need nutrition. We do need amino acids. They're essential. There are essential nutrients, and you get them all from meat, fish, and eggs. Everything that you get that is beneficial from a fruit or a veg is just extra and potentially beneficial, but not essential. And so I'm not telling anybody they can't have berries. I'm not telling anybody they shouldn't eat sauerkraut. I'm just simply stating you can reverse all these things we mentioned earlier, all the mental health situations. You can, I have now 2 friends or become friends of mine, but other friends with multiple sclerosis that I'm trying to assist, that this is reversible through all of this. We said the kidney disease, the hypertension, all of these things, the heart disease, with nutritional ketosis. And carnivore is just the most potent strength version of nutritional ketosis. So, well, I still, I just ate chuck roast, and I make like a 3-4 meat soup that I have. I had a couple little onion in the soup. I had a couple peas in the soup. I don't care, so if I had 2 fork or spoonfuls of peas and onion in that bowl of soup I ate, not the end of my world. I'm going to a Valentine's Day dinner, again, with all my siblings, like where my origin story started, at a dinner with all of them. We're going to my sister's house tonight, and, I'll blend. If there's salad or some green beans or whatever, I'm going to eat a little of it, just to not try to make the whole night be about me. They already know all about me. They know I've got the podcast. They know I do the coaching. They don't need for me to talk about it anymore. So, so that's kind of what I do, how I eat. I know I'm a full-blown sugar addict, as Dr. Cooley, my co-host, says. Hi, my name's Brett. I'm a sugar addict. And if I ever feel it creeping in, if I allow it to creep in, and having done this now since, end of 2018, there are moments where humanity hits me and I do stupid things like a silly talking monkey, as Dr. Jack Cruz, who's helped me with the whole quantum health aspect of things. Fasting is the quickest way to quelch any food and sugar addiction thing that we have going on. And just 2 weeks ago, I completed my longest fast yet, which for some people, well, second longest technically, but as of knowing fasting's fasting, when I was 24, I did a long fast. I had tonsillectomy when I was 24 years old, and my sutures tore open twice and had to go into the ER and get resutured. And I was so afraid to eat anything to go down my throat. I lived on water and chewing aspargum for about 2.5 weeks. I dropped 30 pounds. because I just put 30 on coming out of college by eating all the stupid fast food and crazy shit. But my longest purposeful extended fast, I just did 145 hours. 6 full days is 144. Didn't try to go 1 extra hour just when my next meal came. And when you're fat adapted, fasting becomes incredibly easy. I'll stop vomiting on you and throw it back to you.
No, you're good. My husband does a lot of long water fasting because he has some pretty severe insulin resistance that is not responding to just carnivore. So we've been doing 10 to 14 day water fasts once a month with him, and we've now gotten him down 50 pounds. His visceral fat from 9 pounds to 5. And we are working on getting that obviously under 1 pound is where we want him to be. But at some point, he will also have like a switch flip where his body will start to respond to low carb the way it should. But, when you do a lot of damage to yourself over the years with the ultra processed foods and stuff, some people come to low carb, keto, carnivore, their metabolism is severely damaged. And while just going low carb works for most people, I would say, for some people it doesn't. So that was something we were trying to figure out with him. So I love fasting. I think fasting, I do sardine fasts and other protein sparing modified fasts. I've done a 37-hour water fast, but my husband loves water fasting. He's crazy about it. I also wanted to say, I really liked your point about not freaking out if you have a little bit of onion or some peas or something like that. I think a lot of the time, especially in our space, a lot of people get really bogged down with like dogmatic thoughts on, I can't have any plants whatsoever. And I think like Bart K's point, if you're eating mostly meat and you're having a tiny bit of plant material, you are still carnivore. That, you know what I mean? Like I use spices. I'll throw a few garlic cloves into a meat. I'm going to make a meat soup later today. I'm going to throw some garlic cloves in. I will steep some rosemary in that broth. And I don't say, oh, well, now I'm just keto, because the bulk of the meal is meat. And I think people really need to understand that,
There is no purity test to all of this. It's not like either you're a virgin or you're no longer a virgin anymore. Now, right. Interestingly, with all of this, I kind of consider if you do this all long enough, that you kind of get some of your non-sexual virginity back. You get all the what I'll call the health of your virgin health of your youth before you did enough damage to be complete, But then I'll feel just absolutely great, and then I'll have pie and something else at something where I'm blending or eggnog. It's Christmas and cookies and shit, and all of a sudden the next day where the damage was. The arthritic knees from the 4 meniscus surgeries, my lower back, that's always been a problem for me for 30 years. Suddenly I feel it all there by the next morning, if not before I'm even asleep, if it was earlier in the day. Oh my God, why was I stupid enough to be a human and a silly talking monkey and do this shit again to myself? Yeah. I know better, but we all have moments of weakness. But you're right. I mean, there are so many people that heal so tremendously. And you go through the types of transformations that people like Carrie Mann from Homestead How has done. Multiple mental health issues, multiple heart issues, dropped like 80 plus pounds. I mean, now if you're, while I showed the before and after, I wound up reversing heart disease, metabolic syndrome, arthritis, tinnitus, BPH, lost 115 pounds, and more. There's more things that I didn't want to put on that list. It's perfectly reasonable for somebody who's made such radical changes to themselves to get quite dogmatic over and say, I'm never going to let that stuff back in. And when I'm coaching people, it's always a double-edged sword of what, because I know how to turn scrambled eggs into hot chocolate mousse, a little cocoa powder, and maybe a little allulose. And for most people, it would probably work. For some people, it might be enough to flip the switch and bring back a sugar addiction. So I always have to be very careful and have long conversations with people before we go down certain rabbit holes and make recommendations for things. Because, hi, my name's Brett. I'm a sugar addict, and stupid little things can start a downward spiral with me. I recognize that with myself. And I put 17,000 hours into understanding all of this the last 6 years. We're human. But so it's really easy. And Carrie's still in his first, 600-700 days of being carnivore. And I'm not saying Carrie ever needs to go off of pure carnivore. Do what works for you. And I have a client where she's reversed so many different things. She doesn't even want to think, and May will be a 1 year for her. And the thought of having sweetness and cocoa powder in scrambled eggs to have chocolate mousse, she's just like, I don't trust myself, because she was 40 times more of a sugar addict than I ever was.
Right.
And she's self-professed, and I didn't mention her name, but she also went on No Carb Life with Dave Mack and said, oh my God, look what Brett did for me. And we found each other in May. And with 6 weeks, she had 20 years of arthritic pain gone, stopped working with canes, was walking like a teenager, looking just happy as heck. Within another 3 weeks, was started going with her doctor off of her SSRIs, and then went off of, she had, before I met her, she dropped 100 pounds or 80 pounds with Wegovy and Ozempic, like GLP-1 agonist. But then she went off of it because it stopped working 4 months before she met me. And within 3 weeks, she put 20 pounds back on. So she went back on to save herself. And that's when I met her 3 months later. And then doing nutritional ketosis, she dropped that 20 pounds again in the first 6-7 weeks, and then got off of the Wegovy, and none of the weight gain came back, none of the craving came back. But she doesn't want to mess with the serious sugar addiction because she lived it, and it monopolized her life for 35 years.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I think that's one of the beautiful things about really getting cued into your own metabolic health, is you start to recognize things about yourself. Like, I'm the same as you. I would say I'm a sugar addict, but not as bad as your client that you were just talking about. But if I go down a rabbit hole, I could lose a few weeks. And my symptoms return very quickly as well. I have a knee, no injuries or anything, but whenever I eat gluten, my left knee starts to hurt a little bit, to the point where I cannot do the strength training exercises or physical activity that I want to do.
Yes.
That comes back immediately. It's insane. And then the mental health stuff, the fogginess, the kind of feeling bogged down, not having I have a pretty sunny disposition most of the time. But if I'm eating ultra processed, high sugar foods, that goes away pretty quickly. It's amazing how quickly it sets in. And that just confirms to me, which I'm sure it confirms to you, that stuff we should not be eating. But once in a blue moon, we're going to do it. We're human, and that's okay. But it's just recognizing, like, can I eat this and then not go down a 2-week carb rabbit hole, And for me, I have learned how to do that in the 2 years that I've been on carnivore. I think an air fryer is a required kitchen tool for anybody following a carnivore diet or a low carb way of eating. The air fryer that I have in my kitchen is the Tasty. Tasty air fryer is a game changer. Not only does it go much higher in temperature than any other air fryer on the market, going up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, but it also has a built-in temperature probe, so you can get your meat cooked to the exact temperature you want every single time. Its sleek design is beautiful on your countertop, and it's also really easy to clean. Tasty just upgraded their basket to have a ceramic coating that is, as always, BPA and PFOA free. So you can rest easy knowing that you're not putting tons of toxic chemicals into your food when you are cooking it. Right now, you can save $30 on your new Tasty air fryer by heading over to tasty.net/Jenny Mitich and using code Jenny30 at checkout. Link and code is in the show notes.
Another quick little anecdotal story. There's a woman by the name of Emily Penton, and she did a video on this, and we've been on each other's podcast, and she's from Missouri. She reversed lifelong bipolar and 10 years of where she was now walking with a walker from MS, going carnivore. And back this last, call it October, she was, kind of talked herself into, because we're silly talking monkeys. And she goes, well, honey comes from a bee, which is kind of animal-like. Right. And started a couple teaspoons of honey. and went off the reservation for 6 weeks, and things started happening again. And she lost 6 weeks from a couple teaspoons of honey.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So that's where we all have to get to know ourselves. We have to start eating because we actually have genuine hunger. Most people don't have genuine hunger. They eat according to a clock. They eat according to habit. I was a stress eater also. So if I had something stressful going on, or if I'm pulling an all-nighter at work, doing those requests for proposals, typing them all up, I would have all this food and coffee and other shit sitting next to my desk so that I could, I just justified it. Well, I'm just keeping myself busy. It's how I'm staying awake, even though I was probably not. But, oh God, I junk fooded all of those late nights. And, but any stress, I got kind of taught. And I think both my mom and dad, to a degree, were stress eaters. And I know my mom was a closet candy eater, and my dad too. I worked with my dad for 10 years. He kept it hid in his desk. My mom would hide it in the cabinets in our kitchen and all over the house. And when I was a junior in high school, I figured this out. And so it was always a game of where is the Three Musketeer bars hidden, those little fun size ones. And then she'd realize I ate the package on her, and then she'd find a new hiding place. And I realized that was the beginning of some of my sugar addiction.
Right. Yeah, it's self-perpetuating for sure. And what your family, how you grew up really does influence the way you eat for the rest of your life, unless you've had, moments like we have had where we've come to the light and we're like, oh, okay, and then change it. I think for most people, they don't have that experience, and they just continue to eat the way that they've learned how to eat their entire lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we put too much stock in genetics, and we talk about family history. No, you grew up in a family that all ate the same way and had all of these ritualistic, whether they're religious or they're cultural or they're whatever they are. My mom and me fighting secretly because she never wanted to find out. She didn't know who was doing it. Finally, she just asked, who's stealing my Three Musketeer bars? It's me. And, but no, we all have these things, and it's just too easy to say, well, I have a genetic predisposition to be overweight.
Right.
You might have a predisposition to be a bigger boned and a taller person. But just go look at all the pictures from the 1900s. Go look at even as the 1600s. Go look at Woodstock. Before we went this low-fat craze, the whole world, it was incredibly rare to see obese people. It just didn't happen. There was like one in every high school. Yeah. It might have been a gland problem,
Yeah.
But there's whole other stories to all of that. But yeah, crazy stuff.
I saw I think it was a social media post of like the world's fattest man at a circus in the 1920s. And he is just like a normal looking dude when you compare him to some people
He's
today.
Half the people you see walking around Walmart right now. You would not stick out in a crowd.
Yeah, he would not be famous today. I wanted to pick your brain about something you mentioned earlier in our conversation. You were mentioning your CAC score, and then you talked about the soft plaques and reversing it, and you mentioned a protocol. Could you kind of do a basic overview of how you reversed your heart disease? Because I think that, when I asked this question of doctors in the low-carb space, they've seen reversal of CAC, of the calcified plaque. But they haven't figured out the mechanisms per se. And I think that's really important to look into. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So first of all, this is not me, Brett Smith's protocol. I saw Patrick tweet on Ivar's podcast, and it was April of 2018. Go to the Fat Emperor. You can look for it. But anybody can just email me, brett@mymetaboliclife.com. I will email the protocol to anybody.
And I will put that email and all of your information in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Happy to share it. But from an overarching standpoint, what it comes down to, and this gets contentious because I joined a number of heart disease, Facebook pages, and some people are like, oh, you don't need to be in ketosis, but they never got the reversal. And the people that all got the reversal tended to be this way. So Patrick says right out that he figured out when he was young and an athlete about ketosis. and being a fat burner and the endurance and everything with it. And he coaches some Olympic athletes on this type of stuff. So he's got multiple PhDs. He's a real brainiac type of a person, head of science at Wausau Papers. And so anyhow, what happens is that, so the base level of this is be keto. Live in ketosis, wherever that is for you, that achieves. And, you know, you can do the Keto Mojo, and box is sitting over there.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a little finger prick to check your ketones and your glucose. You
can you have an opinion on what the minimum level of ketones should be to be in nutritional ketosis for this?
It's no. Well, technically kind of the threshold I think that's generally accepted is 0.5 and up.
Okay.
But if you're at 0.4 on a given day, it's nothing to freak out over.
Okay.
But, you know, if you're generally at 0.5 and you have a GKI of anything kind of under 8, 9 routinely, you're great. You know, that's a good, but that was never part of his protocol. He didn't throw that in there. That's me in the 6 years now of living it and working with people and myself. But he was just mainly like, you know, live in ketosis, focus on your meat, fish, and eggs. If you want, you know, he figured out the sauerkraut. He figured out that the K vitamins are critical. He's got a list of supplements that he goes, this is not a lifetime supply of lists to be living off of. However, because most people coming into this, unlike you for a couple of years and me for 6 years now, you know, eating the way we eat, that's why I called it Nutrivore. I eat the most nutriently dense stuff. And you might need to be on supplements for a year, 2 or 3 to get to base levels of all these things. But his whole criteria of the things like the coenzyme Q10, the K vitamins, the B complex, certain amount of vitamin C and all these things. But he'll say, there is vitamin C in meat. Red meat includes vitamin C. And once you're at a certain level, and much of this, even though he didn't go into all of this, but me living it the last 6 years and everything, the amount of standard American diet and glucose you allow into your body fights with the vitamin C. It's the same receptor that takes it up. And so if you have a lot of glucose, you need more vitamin C just to get what, if you're a carnivore, you're getting enough from the meat, but you might want to up it for a couple of weeks or whatever. But eventually you do this for 6 months to a year with this list of supplements, and then you go get tested. And where are your levels at? If you're at normal levels, stop the supplementation, just go off of the food. 3-6 months later, test again. Are you still at what you need to be at for all of this? And so I'm not saying, hey, you have to be a supplement junkie for the rest of your life, but depending upon, and this is just where everything else with every condition that ketosis works with, it all depends how metabolically broken you are when you start. Just like you said with your husband and all of us, some of us are more medically damaged and metabolically damaged than others, and we have a longer healing journey. And we go off the reservation quick, half minute, and suddenly you feel it in those same places again. But, you know, so there is no perfect 8-week program for $200 that you can buy and follow, because we all start in different places. It might take somebody 3 weeks to become fat adapted and in nutritional ketosis. It could take somebody else 6 weeks. It could, you know, somebody else by having their insulin so super astronomically high for such a period of time, it could take them a year to 15 months to of really being serious before the insulin melts away. Their glucose is low. They go, why am I not getting results? And it's usually a couple-day fast that will break that the insulin, at least temporarily, but it's always reading. You put something on your tongue, your body's reading what's coming in, and all of a sudden we start pumping insulin at levels we've taught our body to do, not what we need for what's actually coming in. It takes a while for us to override the system because we've pounded it for so long, we get programmed.
Yeah. So ketosis, the supplement, which includes like K vitamins, coenzyme Q10.
There's about 12 of them. So arginine, there's a number of different things in there that I wouldn't rattle them all off of.
No, of course. And then sauerkraut.
Perfectly.
So there's a whole protocol that what was this doctor's name that came up with it?
Well, he's not a doctor. He's got multiple PhDs, so he's not a medical doctor.
Right.
Patrick Teut, Theut or Uit, I sometimes, but it took me I stalked him online for like 4 months to find until he finally gave the whole protocol. And I finally found one, and he kind of brought in like a tackle box for fishing, which has, he loads it up once a month, and it has everything that somebody would need in it that he could show.
And it's based also on blood work, like you just talked about, where you are at in your metabolic health journey. You may need some more vitamin C than somebody else, and it's based on, blood work and all those.
Magnesium, super important. Mm-hmm. Your salt and potassium levels, important. Being on all of the minerals. So if you have a quality salt, a Redmond's real salt, a pink Himalayan quality ones, that you're going to have all the trace minerals. All 81 minerals are going to be in there, but many people are still using Morton salt, which strips all of those out and sells them as trace minerals, to companies.
Yeah.
So there's figuring out the amount of salt that you need, the electrolytes that you need, and that's just kind of, with time, you figure all of this out. But, so I go, here's 6 videos of Patrick, and here's him describing, and here's me typing up what he just described, and how he calls it like the 12-headed dragon, that you got to go after all 12 different heads of this thing. And so, but stress is incredibly important with this. Getting proper sleep is incredibly important with all of this. Getting some form of exercise, but not overdoing. If you're doing way too much aerobic, you are now creating more reactive oxygen species that is taking you down the negative side of exercise. So there's a lot to it per se. And I found it 4 months before I found the pulse cardiac test. And, I said to Dr. Harrington, who created that, I go, well, I found this protocol. And then when a year later he goes, Brett, what have you been doing? I've never seen anybody drop this amount this fast of plaque. And I go, well, I told you a year ago, but I knew you thought I was crazy that I found this protocol. And, so we talked about it a little bit more. And it's so many different things. All these conditions are very multifactorial. There is no one perfect single silver bullet that's going to fix everything. But something else you said, which we could go into, got a couple minutes left here, that, ketosis is a big part of this, getting your nutrient levels, which the carnivore diet will do it all by itself, meat, fish, and eggs. But if you want to wait that time for yourself to get to those levels. But I think for most people, for most things that they have going on, if, whether you're 20 carb or under keto, or you're carnivore and you're doing it as a vegan or vegetarian, whatever, I'm not going to, because those things are just like people can get dogmatic over being pure carnivore. That happens so much more on the other side of the aisle. Because that's an identity kind of a thing. It's like a religion for a lot of these people. It has nothing to do with human health. It has to do with other ideologies. But anyhow, most people can, with just 20 carb or less keto, solve 80%, 60% of what's going on with them. There are other things, and I put a couple thousand hours into figuring this out the last 2.5 years of what you would call the circadian health and the circadian rhythm. And I sold Ambien, the #1 sleeping pill in the world. So back in 2002, when I did that, I had to go way down a lot of this. And I am so much farther down. 5% of what I learned to sell Ambien is what I now understand about circadian biology, and what getting light first thing in the morning is in your eyes, how important that is, how making sure from a circadian biology standpoint, historically, and again, there are people with various religious beliefs that'll believe humans have only been on this planet for 6,000 years. And I'm not here to get into a theological debate with anybody, but as long as ancestors and previous versions of our ancestors have been on this planet, out in the sun. We've only had electric lights since Edison and 1880s. And every time there was a new technology, you can actually go back and see how much it messed with a certain percentage of the population. But blue light that's coming at us through our screens, through our TVs, through our cell phones, through our now LED bulbs that the government said get off of. Thank God they've now reversed this and now allow you to get the incandescent again. Get incandescent bulbs, people. The LED. So historically, we were only exposed. The blue light only comes out about 10 in the morning, which is why if you and I go somewhere really warm, we're not going to burn in first thing in the morning. It's closer to noon to 2. That 10 to 2 is the burning period of time, and then the blue light starts phasing out. But that's also when we create the vitamin D in our skin from the cholesterol that's in our skin. Another great thing cholesterol does, and so that's really ultra important. So if you are somebody, and I have somebody I'm now working with who's a tech person, and I've made the recommendations. You wake up in the morning, it's dark out here in Wisconsin right now. It's not going to get sunrise until right now, 6:40-ish to 7-ish is when it starts happening. But 2 months ago, it was at 4:30 in the morning, it was pitch dark until 7:30 in the morning. We all went to school in the dark when we were young. But put these blue blocking, orangish tinted glasses, amber tinted glasses on, and then by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, put them on again until you go to sleep, until you start becoming no longer insulin resistant, you're insulin sensitive. Because just the technology alone and all of that blue light being pounding you all the time, if you're a tech heavy, phone heavy person, it creates insulin resistance all by itself, even if you're eating the perfect thing. So there's people that are very big circadian health coaches and quantum health coaches that they get people to do carnivore keto really, really well, and they can't get results because it's the technology aspect. And even sitting too close to a Wi-Fi in your house, you want that away from you. You do not want that right next to you. You do not want your phone charging next to you at night. Get it out of the bedroom is the best thing you can do. So those are really important. But then from a quantum health standpoint, that light is also information that comes in through our eyes and tells our brain certain things. And so understanding the implications of blue light at the wrong time of day and night, and not getting enough red light, because red light's out all the time that the sun's out. And we need to eat more seasonally. If at your latitude something doesn't grow, this is why we had root cellars and everything. And, we would make jams and we'd make sauerkraut and make kimchi and all these different things, because we went through 4 or 5 months where we had no access to these things.
Yeah.
But the fermented aspect of it really helps it a lot. But what happens is that if you don't have proper red light exposure, and we now sit inside, we avoid the sun, we don't, we only put sunscreen on, which doesn't allow everything to get through the body. So red light therapy can be really important. So getting out in the sun, getting that first morning, take the glasses off when the sun starts coming out, get outside for, if it's only 30 seconds to 2 minutes, get the sun in your eyes when sunrise is happening in that first 30 minutes. If you can get outside, especially your first month or two of getting exposed to this, as the sun's going down, and get another minute, 2, 3, 4, 5 of watching the sunset happen, and watch the sun or the sky go from pink, orange, and all of these things as sunset happens. That helps reset your circadian and your quantum health and biology. And then there's things like hydrogen water and different things like this that we can go down 2 hours into a whole nother thing of all of the quantum health things. But basically, people, we all break down to molecules that are, electrons, protons, and neutrons. And then there's quarks inside of some of these things. And there's all this different stuff. And there's a great book here, The Body Electric. You can get some really good by Robert O. Becker, who's actually the guy who created the MRI machine, and many other great inventions. And you can start understanding how our electronic terrain environment around us can completely mess with us. And not having proper sleep cycles and getting a proper amount of sleep and sleeping in truly dark rooms with no night lights, no anything else on. I haven't turned on a light where I live once the sun goes down in almost 2 years now. I will get some red bulbs in there just to, because it'd be better just to see a little bit better. But
seeing is good.
but I will sit with some blue blockers and watch a little TV, in a dark. But that's how crazy.
Do you use candles or anything like that?
No, well, I don't. Not that I'm against them. Candlelight, nothing wrong with that.
Because that's a red spectrum light, correct?
As well as incandescent bulbs. So I'm not fearful of because they're not throwing blue at you. Don't sleep in a room with an incandescent bulb on, because we are a yin yang. We need light, we need darkness. And many things happen in our physiology tied to the darkness, the melatonin and everything. What we set in the pituitary gland, the melatonin that we make, that releases around 12:30 at night by getting sunrise in the eyes at a certain time. You no longer start getting that. You get that all thrown. There's so many different things that we can go down the rabbit hole on, but there's more than food that creates insulin resistance, and that's what you need to understand. For sure.
We're going to have to do another interview where we dive into the quantum aspects and all of that kind of stuff, because I feel like the very first thing most people need to get dialed in is nutrition. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's 80% of it. And then once you have a handle on that, then you can start really looking at all the other things: sleep, stress, exercise, light, air, water, all of these things you can start to look at. Sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming to people. So I always say, just start with nutrition. Get used to that.
Even though for some people, and this is a minority of people, but those super tech people who have monstrative sugar addiction also, and it's too much for them to give, okay, well, let's work on your light environment for the first 2 weeks. And let's cut from 400 carbs to 300 carbs for a week.
Right.
Let's go to 200 carbs for a week. But we can work on this other thing that I'm guessing is leading to insulin resistance with you. So not everybody starts in the same place. For 95% of people, I 100% agree with the statement you just made. I'm not trying to poo-poo that at all. But for some people, I know people that are Mountain Dew addicts.
Yeah.
And this is their security blanket because they're maybe an emotional eater. They're not ready to give it up yet because what I said isn't enough yet.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I do agree with you. In my coaching practice, I've seen that too. I think that's why it's so important to get to know the person and see what's really going on. And then you can do a plan of attack, because every person is an individual.
Absolutely.
So,
we need to come in for a wind down, because I'm somewhere else doing another one of these somewhere else.
Brett has a lot of things going on. So Brett, thank you so much for this interview today. I'm going to put all of your links in the show notes, along with all of the books that you showed us today. For those of you that are just listening, I'll put all of those in the show notes.
And that's just scratching the surface. You can see behind me here, behind me here, behind me here. And the first 40 I bought are all on Kindle and only available currently on my iPad and phone. So, but whenever I'm going to interview somebody who wrote one of them, I make sure I buy them and I have them hard copy, or if I just want to have them.
Yeah, I appreciate that about you, Brett, because you can't see in mine, but I have a whole library as well. I'm an avid reader, so I love it when I meet somebody else that also loves to read. So it's great. Well, Brett, thank you again for doing this with me, and we're going to have to do this again.
Jenny, such a pleasure. I'm at your disposal anytime you ever want.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everybody.
Optimize your nutrition without compromise using Keto Brick. Keto Bricks are high-calorie meal replacement bars that can help you optimize your performance. Keto Bricks come in many different flavors, and they have many different protein bases. So if you are animal-based or plant-based, there is a brick for you. There's typically a little bit of variation in the macros, but most bars have 90 grams of fat, 30 grams of protein, and 14 grams of carbs. And they just recently started making bars that have tallow as their base. base. All of their products are produced in-house, and they do not cut corners, use cheap filler ingredients, or loads of sweeteners. I love their Bell's Brownie Batter Bar. That bar has some organ meat powder in it. It's really, really yummy. And I also really like their chocolate peanut butter bar. Head to the link in the show notes to check out Keto Brick for yourself. Like I said, all of these products are made in-house, so they make them in small batches. Whenever they have a new batch, they put it up on their socials and they sell out really, really quick. But I've been loving Keto Brick to add some fat to my daily macros. And also, if I just need like something sweet or something chocolatey, I can cut off a little piece of the Keto Brick and have that. And then I'm not spiking my blood sugar and I'm not eating any kind of ultra processed candy bar or something like that. And I'm scratching that itch. It's been really nice for that. Keto Bricks also travel really well. I cut them up into pieces and put them into Ziploc bags and brought them with me on my trip out to Vegas recently. And they were awesome to have around. Head to the link in the show notes to get your Keto Bricks today.